Tonight, we want to introduce the minister from Jordan, and to you, members of the council, guests, friends, and on behalf of colleagues on the Board of Trustees, I would like to welcome him to this evening's program. However, let me just say that we'd like to thank the Westinghouse Corporation for putting up the cost for this evening. This makes your tickets much cheaper. We are well aware of the long-standing friendship. I'm reading this, and you'll find out as soon as I get to the second paragraph. We are all aware of the long-standing friendship between the United States and Jordan, and we are well aware of the critical role that Jordan will play in any resolutions of Arab-Israeli conflict in general and that of the occupied territories in particular. Therefore, we are fortunate. I'm sorry.
Speaking to the mic.
Right. Therefore, we are fortunate to be joined by one of Jordan's respected Foreign Service officers, her Deputy Chief of Missions in Washington. And Ambassador Hussein Mamani was called on the phone by our President, Mr. Bush, on Friday and invited to dinner tonight, and there was no way he could get out of it. I don't know how. But we've got one speaker that's just as good. I've talked to him. He has a very interesting background I'm going to tell you about. The Dr. Sultan Lufti has been a member of his nation's foreign service since 1962. He holds a BA in mathematics from the American University of Beirut, a diploma in international relations and international economics from Oxford University, a master's degree in economics from Howard University, and a PhD in economics from the George Washington University. That's pretty high credentials. He's held field positions in areas of economics and international organizations in Amman, Jordan, and everybody knew Amman was in Jordan, and my boss over here not to tell you that, but I made a slip. He's been posted to the United Nations as counselor in New York and to Washington. First Secretary and now Deputy Chief of Mission. We're pleased to have with us tonight. It's my privilege to present to you Minister Dr. Sultan Najeb Lufti.
That's my timer. Good evening. It's my personal pleasure to be invited to share with you a few thoughts on the foreign policy of Jordan and the prospects for peace in the Middle East. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to you, Mr. Wallace, for your efforts on behalf of the Baltimore Council on Foreign Affairs. As a group committed to the pursuit of international understanding and peace, your enthusiasm and sincerity is reflected in your presence here. A presence aimed at promoting a better understanding for the complex issues of the conflict. Your presence here assures me of your concern for the issue that I will be addressing. Like myself, Arab officials, as well as intellectuals and academicians, welcome the opportunity to engage in a dialogue with the various institutions in the United States, be it official or otherwise. We recognize the importance of such dialogue, not only because we believe in the justice of our position, but also because we believe that America is essentially fair, though not necessarily always well informed. In our discussion as representatives, specialists, and academicians, or mere observers of the Arab-Israeli conflict, we examine the situation in the Middle East as well as the peace process in the region in the hope that we may contribute to its reinvigoration. To this end, I will attempt to shed light on the peace process from a Jordanian perspective, specifically the role of Jordan since the war of 1967. Of course, this is not meant merely to be a historical narration of events, but rather an attempt to analyze these events. Some narration, however, may be worthwhile, if not only to demonstrate Jordan's unflagging commitment to peace. Since 1967, King Hussein dealt with the changing interests and priorities of 5 US presidents, observed the growing ambitions and consequently hardening positions of 6 Israeli prime ministers, conducted determined, though sometimes taxing dialogue with PLO leaders, and sought the support of endless number of world leaders. Some of you may also know that King Hussein was personally involved in the drafting of Security Council Resolution 242. I mention all this to underline that no single person has been as dedicated as King Hussein in his quest for the peaceful settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict. He still is. Today, more than 21 years have passed since 1967, as well as since the adoption of Resolution 242 and its Land for Peace formula. And yet, nothing has been achieved except 2 wars, 3 disengagement agreements, and 1 bilateral peace treaty that did not lead to the comprehensive peace. During these 21 years, the Arab position witnessed a slow but steady tilt towards moderation, culminating in the peace plan adopted by the Arab Summit Conference in Fez in 1982. Meanwhile, on the other fence, the sentiment was developing from self-satisfaction after victory in 1967 to a sense of complacency that peace can be achieved by the sheer ability to sustain the de facto situation, that the bargain of land for peace need not be, that they can have their cake and eat it, or at least part of it. In the Arab mind, this impasse was exacerbated by the inability of the United States to be genuinely even-handed in its mediating efforts. The United States was perceived as being in the unenviable position of having to deal with the Arab-Israeli conflict under the contradictory dictates of its own national interest on one hand and its domestic political considerations on the other hand, as defined by certain non-American interest groups in this country. This explains, perhaps, why American peace efforts were fruitless. They were not dictated by the moral weight of the genuine American national interest. Morally, mostly, they were directed towards mere containment and damage control. During these 21 years, Jordan gave support to every peace initiative aimed at achieving a regional settlement of the conflict. Observe the following. First, in 1967, we accepted Security Council Resolution 242. Second, in 1968, Jordan cooperated with the United Nations Secretary General Representative Ambassador Gunnar Yaring on the implementation of Resolution 242. Third, in 1970, we welcomed Secretary of State William Rogers' initiative. Fourth, in the aftermath of the 1973 war, we accepted Security Council Resolution 338, which reaffirmed Resolution 242 and called for its implementation through the appropriate conference to be held for this purpose. An international conference for peace was held in Geneva in December 1973. Jordan participated in the conference, whose only outcome was that the United States took the initiative to achieve a disengagement of forces on the Israeli-Egyptian front and Israeli-Syrian front, and this was carried through. On our part in Jordan, we requested that the United States brings about a similar disengagement of forces between Israel and Jordan. Israel rejected that. Fifth, in 1977, the American-Soviet statement was issued relating to a peaceful settlement based on international legitimacy. It was a balanced statement which we appreciated and supported. Israel rejected the communique. In fact, Jordan did everything within its power to secure the implementation of Resolution 242 and 238, but was faced with Israel's adamant refusal to honor its commitment under these resolutions. Israel not only rejected total withdrawal for total peace, but proceeded to annex Arab Jerusalem and the Golan Heights and to establish settlements in the occupied territories. Six, assured of a superior military strength, Israel did not feel the urgency of peace. It put more value to the retention of territory, but hoped it could have both. Jordan's genuine interest in a just peace has prompted us to warn of the dangers inherent in any approach that does not address fully and adequately the comprehensive settlement. It is for this reason that Jordan was unable to support the Camp David Accords signed in 1978. The Camp David framework, when we talk about Camp David framework, we have to notice two things. Camp David has two documents: the peace treaty between Egypt and Israel, and the framework for peace for the whole region. As for the treaty between Israel and Egypt, we bless the Egyptians. The Egyptians saw what's good for them, they pursued it, they got their territory for peace. What we objected to is the framework for peace, the second document. The Camp David framework does not resolve the substantive issues involved in a comprehensive settlement. Essentially, the framework is either silent or vague on the following vital questions necessary for a comprehensive settlement. First, withdrawal of Israeli forces from the West Bank and Gaza. Second, the question of the legitimate right of the Palestinian people, including their right to self-determination. Third, the question of Arab Jerusalem. Fourth, Jerusalem was consisted in two parts, the Israeli part and the Arab part. We are talking about the Arab part. Fourth, the question of Israeli settlements. Five, the question of sovereignty and the final status of these occupied territories. The framework simply calls for negotiation on some of these issues, but fails to provide the clear act of principles on which these negotiations should be passed. In short, the framework promised part of the Palestinian people, those in the territories, a fraction of their rights on a small portion of their homeland. 7. We welcome the serious efforts of the European community culminating in the formulation of the Paris Declaration of 1980. 8. In September 1982, President Reagan advanced his proposal for a negotiated Middle East settlement. This peace initiative called for Israeli withdrawal from the occupied territories, a freeze on Israeli settlements, and the establishment of a Palestinian national entity in confederation with Jordan. Its proposals were based on a concept of territory for peace, a concept which was advocated by King Hussein since 1967. Jordan viewed the plan as a courageous step. 9. Shortly after, Arab leaders met in Fez in Morocco and unanimously adopted an 8-point peace plan that called for the withdrawal of Israeli forces from the Arab territories, the rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination, and respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states in the region, implicitly including Israel. With strong hopes, Jordan exerted intense efforts during the following months to devise a negotiating formula to get the Arab Summit, the peace plan, which is the ceiling, and Reagan plan, which is the floor, to find a middle ground between. That's what we were engaged in. Based mainly on U.S. Security Council Resolution 242 and acceptable to all parties involved in the conflict. Israel's devastating invasion of Lebanon, however, was followed soon after by its immediate and outright rejection of President Reagan's peace plan. Its negative position strengthened the doubts of many Arabs regarding the chances for a negotiated settlement. 10. There followed a period of inaction for several months. We found ourselves at an impasse resulting from a lack of response by the United States to the Arab peace plan. It became apparent to us that the United States' political posture towards the Palestinian cause stems from two considerations. First, the United States does not support the establishment of a Palestinian independent Palestinian state. Second, rejection by the United States to deal with the PLO in any peace process unless the PLO accepted Security Council Resolution 242 and 338 at a time when we consider participation by the PLO a basic principle. We then, in Jordan, conducted an intensive dialogue with the leadership of the PLO and arrived at the Amman Accord of February 11, 1985, where we coordinated our strategy to move into the peace talks between Jordan and the PLO. After having achieved a good measure of coordination and cooperation, differences arose between us and the PLO leadership on the interpretation of the priorities of joint Jordanian-Palestinian action, putting a stop at the process. At that time, Arafat could not get the approval of the executive committee to accept 242. And so we told the Reagan administration, sorry, stop over there. 11, lastly, in December 1987, the Palestinian Arab people rose in a widespread uprising involving people of all ages and persuasions. It became a genuine revolt against the Israeli occupier. It took the Israelis by surprise. Actually, it took the PLO by surprise too. Causing confusion and bringing about a realization for the first time, after 20 years of occupation, that the continuation of the occupation had a heavy financial, moral, and political price. It drove the Israelis to export its true nature and disregard for human rights. It disturbed Jewish groups around the world, particularly in the United States, which has launched a new peace initiative, the Schultz Initiative. Once again, we agreed to engage in a dialogue with Secretary of State Schultz over his initiative in coordination with Arab countries, especially Syria. We have to bring Syria to the peace process. Our interaction with the new initiative was based on a set of principles which we enclosed in a memorandum which also set forth our understanding of the initiative in the light of our contacts and discussions with the American side. These principles are, they were published in the press. First, the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war. Israeli withdrawal from the occupied territories is the basis for the settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict and the establishment of a just and durable peace. Second, the settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict requires the settlement of the Palestinian problem in all its aspects, including the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. Third, the settlement of the Arab-Israeli conflict and the Palestinian problem must be a comprehensive settlement. Negotiations to arrive at a comprehensive settlement can only take place within the international conference. Fourth, the international conference will not be merely a ceremonial international gathering structured for the sole purpose of launching direct negotiations. It should reflect the moral and constant weight of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations, the Security Council, to arrive at a comprehensive peace. 5. The principles of Security Council Resolution 242 apply to all the occupied territories and are the basis for negotiations in the bilateral committees. There, they as principles are not negotiable in the work of the committees. 6. In exercising its sovereign right, Jordan is prepared to attend the international conference with the other involved parties. Jordan will not represent the Palestinians at the conference, nor will it negotiate the settlement of the Palestinian problem on behalf of the PLO. Jordan is also prepared to attend the conference in a joint Jordanian-Palestinian delegation if the concerned parties accept this arrangement. As for our understanding of the American initiative as presented to the U.S. Secretary of State, we have summarized it as follows. First, the international conference shall be convened to attain a comprehensive peace settlement to the Arab-Israeli conflict. Second, the UN Secretary General shall issue invitations to all the parties involved in the Arab-Israeli conflict, including the PLO as well as the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, to participate in the conference. The PLO will be invited to the conference since the Palestinian people must be active participants in the negotiations to determine their future. Third, the international conference in the context of the Arab-Israeli conflict requires the participation of the United States and the Soviet Union. Fourth, the international conference will have an ongoing role. 5. Final status negotiations over the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and the Golan Heights will be based on all the provisions and principles of Security Council Resolution 242. Thus, all the provisions and principles of this resolution apply to all the occupied territories in West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and the Golan Heights. Finally, any transitional arrangements are a step towards the final status and not a separate or interim one. Since transitional arrangements directly affect the final settlement, they apply to all the lands and resources of the occupied territories. They also apply to all Palestinian people in the occupied territories, including the Palestinians in the Arab section of Jerusalem. These are the principles to which we have affirmed our commitment as we deal with the issue. They clearly indicate our reservations with regards to a number of points contained in it. In any case, the Schultz initiative, despite its rejection by the Israeli government, continues to be the subject of a dialogue between the United States, the Soviet Union, and involved Arab states, with a view to developing it so as to conform with the basis of the Arab policy. Israeli pronouncements since the Camp David Accords indicate how it views the whole peace process. Basically, it claims the principle of withdrawal does not apply to the West Bank and Gaza. It continues to claim the right to establish settlements in any part of these territories at will, as if their legitimate Palestinian inhabitants have no rights, and as if the presence of these inhabitants is merely accidental. Some Israeli leaders claim they have a God-given right to the Palestinian occupied territory. Others refrain from making such claims, but all agree on a common platform based on the following measures. First, no to negotiation with the PLO. Second, no to return to borders of 1967. Third, no to withdrawal from Arab section of Jerusalem. Fourth, no to dismantling of settlements. 5. No to an independent Palestinian state on the West Bank and Gaza. And finally, no to the right of self-determination for the Palestinians. It is no wonder that the region continues to be one of the most dangerous hotbeds of tension in the world. It is no wonder also that these circumstances could provoke a major development that will no doubt leave a deep imprint on the destiny of the Palestinian people in the Middle East. And that is the uprising of the Palestinians under occupation in all parts of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Now, in its 13th month, the uprising underscores the consensus of the Palestinian people on rejecting and resisting the occupation, and calls on the world to help in bringing that occupation to an end. For Israel, the message is loud and clear. The mere passage of time is no guarantee that established facts are irrevocable. It is unfortunate that Israel does not seem to be getting the message. The brutal methods it is using to suppress the uprising certainly indicates that the virtue of wisdom is all but forgotten. And the lesson of history that teach us time and again the futility of such methods have not been absorbed. Arrogance breeds hatred, and radicalism provokes its counter-radicalism in a vicious cycle with no end. One is pleased, however, to note one hopeful sign, though it comes from another quarter. The United States now recognize the need to address the political rights of the Palestinians. Small as it is, it remains significant because it is a step in the right direction. When one speaks on the subject of Jordan's role in the Middle East peace, it is necessary to shed light on the reasons behind the Jordanian measures adopted in relation to the West Bank. In 1950, Jordan united its destiny with the West Bank voluntarily and of free choice in a constitutional unity that was after the 1948 war, achieved democratically. When the West Bank Palestinians decided on unity with the East Bank of Jordan in 1950, the union of the two banks was accomplished with the understanding, formally expressed in the Unification Act, that such a union would not jeopardize in any way the continued efforts towards a just and final settlement of the Palestinian issue, according to the wishes and with the involvement of the Palestinians themselves. That union formed the legal basis for Jordan's quest to end the Israeli occupation of the West Bank after the 1967 war. Security Council Resolution 242 also expressed the importance and legitimacy of Jordan's legal role in working for the end of the occupation, which means that the unity between the East Bank and the West Bank of Jordan in 1950 was conditional. Whenever a final settlement of the quote-unquote the Palestine question, then the Palestinians of the West Bank will be given a choice whether to stay with us or go stay as alone or unite with Israel. It is their choice. Jordan nevertheless accepted in 1974 the proclamation of the Rabat Summit Conference of the PLO as the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. Although our acceptance created some duplication of roles, we coped with it by trying to reconcile our role in Jordan under the umbrella of constitutional unity and international law with that of the PLO. Accordingly, we lent the PLO our full support internationally and cooperated with it to secure its participation as a key party to international peace initiatives, particularly in the light of the declared position of the United States and Israel that they will refuse to deal with the PLO. Just as Jordan responded to the call made to it by the Arab states in the 1974 Rabat Summit Conference to continue to deal with the West Bank through Jordanian institutions, it has also responded at the Arab Summit Conference held at Algiers last June. It is to the desire of the PLO and in accordance with the inter-Arab policy on that matter to stress the Palestinian identity of the West Bank both formally and substantively by severing the legal and administrative link between Jordan and the West Bank. That may hopefully prompt the parties concerned, the PLO and the Palestinians, whether directly involved or in a position to bring strong influence to bear, to face up more realistically and more seriously to their responsibilities. For our part, we in Jordan are hopeful that these measures will also support the uprising and highlight the role of the PLO in its endeavor to establish its own independent state. We also assert that these measures do not mean the abandonment of our national duty, either towards the Arab-Israeli conflict or towards supporting the Palestinian cause. We will continue to do so to the best of our ability. In addition, Jordan will not give up its commitment to be part of the peace process Jordan's border with Israel are in fact longer than those of any other Arab state, longer even than the combined borders of the West Bank and Gaza with Israel. We watched with great interest the proceedings of the meetings of the Palestine National Council in Algiers last November and welcomed the Council declaration of the establishment of the Palestinian state. We in Jordan recognized the Palestinian state and agreed to convert the offices of the PLO representative in Amman to a Palestinian embassy. An overwhelming majority of the Arab countries, third world countries, and few industrial countries have extended their recognition to this new state. After the Reagan administration turned down Chairman Yasser Arafat's visa request to come to New York and address the UN General Assembly on the question of Palestine, King Hussein was instrumental in changing Mr. Arafat and the PLO's position to a more moderate one that accepts the realities of the Middle East and the superpower politics. Chairman Arafat succeeded in getting the PLO to accept the right of Israel to live in peace in the Middle East, to accept Security Council Resolution 242 and 338, and to renounce terrorism outside Israel and against civilian targets and population. Thus, the PLO met the requirements of the Reagan administration as put forth in the Kissinger Doctrine for resuming dialogue between the two sides. Accordingly, the Reagan administration took the encouraging decision to open a dialogue with the PLO, even though this decision was bitterly fought and resisted by the Israeli government and the pro-Israeli lobby in the United States. PLO policies and attitudes have undergone a positive change. Now we are watching with interest, too, the discussion among the PLO factions on the possibility of forming a Palestinian government in exile, which would assume the responsibility of any talks in any forum on the question of Israeli withdrawal from the West Bank and Gaza and on the exercise of the Palestinian legitimate right for self-determination. We hope that with more positive steps in the right direction from all parties concerned, future chances for settling this chronic conflict will not be missed. One final point before I conclude. Aside from being a principal party to the Arab-Israeli conflict and a major contributor to the peace process, Jordan has been and will remain an important asset on behalf of stability in the region and a principal moderator in inter-Arab politics. Jordan shoulders its national responsibilities on these bases. Thank you.
Well, we do thank you for that very thorough presentation of Jordan's position. The floor is open for questions until 10 minutes after the hour. I believe you were next.
How does Jordan reconcile its support for the legitimate rights of the Palestinians with the potential threat that an independent Palestinian state on its border might pose to Jordan, and given Israel's implacable refusal to recognize an independent Palestinian state on its border, what circumstances would have to prevail for Jordan to consider a confederation with the West Bank?
The question, I believe, is how does Jordan propose solving the dilemma of A, the threat perhaps of an independent Palestinian state to Jordan, and B, the perceived threat on the part of Israel that would be posed by an independent Palestinian state? Does that capture?
And what circumstances would have to prevail for Jordan to seriously consider a federation with the West Bank?
And would you articulate the conditions which would have to exist for Jordan to consider a federation with the West Bank?
First of all, if we ever reach a stage in negotiations where a Palestinian state will emerge, it is no threat to Jordan, neither to Israel, because we assume unofficially, that the new Palestinian state will be demilitarized. So, at least for a period of time, to prove, to show some form of coexistence between the Palestinians and the Israelis and so on. So we don't see it as a threat to Jordan. On this, what I said is that we don't feel that the new proposed Palestinian state on the West Bank and Gaza is in any way a threat to the security of Jordan, neither to Israel. Because we assume that at the early stages of the state, there must be some form of demilitarized state, free of arms, delivery of systems or attack systems, which in no way will threaten Jordan or Israel until we have an atmosphere of mutual confidence between both. As for the proposed confederation between Jordan and the Palestinian state, after the emergence of the state, then there will be a vote between the Palestinians and between the Jordanians to see where they have to unite. That's what the king told the Jordanians, that if the Palestinians vote on whether they unite with us or stay alone, then the Jordanians will also have the right to vote on this unity.
Yes, sir.
It is well known that there is a large Palestinian population within the borders of present-day Jordan. Is Jordan willing to opt Palestinian state? And secondly, Jordan had control of the West Bank. Why did not, at that time, Jordan offer the Palestinians freedom and a separate state?
Two questions. One, is Jordan prepared to offer a vote for independence to Palestinians presently residing within Jordan? And if so, and if the vote were for independence, would Jordan offer part of its state as territory for those Palestinians to be included in a new state? And the second question is, Jordan, a historical question, Jordan had control of the West Bank in effect at one point. Why did it not then offer an independent Palestinian state on the West Bank?
On the first part of your question, there are Palestinians on the East Bank of Jordan. Yes, there are Jordanian citizens of Palestinian origin. There was a campaign in the U.S. press for a long time. I assume it started in Australia by some gentlemen, that Jordan is Palestine. And in Jordan there is 60 or 70% population, so why not turn it to Palestine and solve the whole problem? Well, we know from statistics, and I can refer you to an article written by Valerie York in the Middle East International in London. The estimated population of the Jordanian citizens, mind you, everyone on the East Bank is a Jordanian citizen. The percentage of the Jordanian citizens of Palestinian origin is estimated between 38, 39, or 40%. It's not a majority. Now, why don't we offer them a free choice? First of all, they don't ask for it. They are Jordanian citizens. Half the cabinet is originally Palestinian. Before we dissolved the parliament was 60 members, 30% from the East Bank and 30% from the West Bank. So they have a vested interest in the status quo. Third, the unity in 1950 between the East Bank and the West Bank was conditional. It said that after the final solution of the Palestinian problem in its own entirety, those Palestinians will be given a choice. And the Palestinians on the East Bank will be given a choice. If there is a peaceful settlement for the Arab-Israeli conflict, we're going to tell them, you are Jordanian citizens, you have passport. If you like to stay Jordanians, welcome. If you like to be citizens of the new emerging states, fair and well, they'll be with you. Give us the passport and take the Palestinian passport. Why when Jordan was controlling the West Bank, didn't give them independence? Because the Palestinians didn't ask for it, they didn't call it. The Palestinians always thought of going back to live with the Israelis or with the Jews in one secular state. Because had they asked for it, the PLO will not cooperate with us, will not coordinate with us. And PLO was established, as you know, in 1964. Before.
I think you're next, sir.
In your speech, you referred several times to an international conference for the solution of the problem. The history of the Israeli-Arab conflict indicates that the only time there was any kind of an agreement reached when the Arabs and the Israelis spoke together. The first time it was in 1949 when not a peace treaty, but a disengagement agreement was reached, and the second time was when the Camp David Accord. So if this is the case, and basically the only way a resolution to the conflict will happen if the people who are involved in the conflict speak to each other, why are you so opposed to talking to the Israelis face to face?
I'm sorry to say that
The question is, if indeed it's true that progress has only been made when the Arabs and Israelis meet face to face, why do you favor international conferences?
First of all, it was not the only two times the Arabs and the Israelis met and talked. It's not the 1949 Armistice Agreement and then the Camp David. In between, there was the Geneva Conference, international conference in 1973, where the Jordanians, the Egyptians, and I assume the Syrians and the Israelis met under the auspices of the United States and Soviet Union. And two disengagement agreements were concluded, one between Egypt and Israel and one between Syria and Israel. We are not opposed to direct negotiations. Direct negotiations will be in the committees. We insist on the international conference for following factors. First, there is a mutual distrust between all parties. The Israelis, the Arabs don't trust the Israelis don't trust the Arabs. Second, the Israelis need security. They have to know that the international conference will not be turned like United Nations. Every time a resolution is there, they blast the hell out of them. So, third, if you are concluding a comprehensive peace, you have to let all the parties concerned. All parties concerned, Syria is a party. It has the Golan Heights occupied. It's annexed. Lebanon, southern Lebanon, there is party, Israeli forces on the southern Lebanon. Jordan, we have problems with the Israelis and the Palestinians. So the international conference, because of the 5 permanent members, they can give assurances to everyone that you are not threatened, you will not be taken for a ride. This derived sense of confidence, of security, is conducive to everybody to sit there and talk in the committees. There will be direct talks in the committees.
Yes, ma'am, I think you're next.
Dr. I'd like to ask you, why do you think the United States has been so slow to recognize the Palestinian state?
The assertion is the United States has been slow to recognize, I presume you mean both the PLO and then a Palestinian state. And if so, why do you guess that's the case?
First of all, the United States did not recognize the Palestinian state. The United States has only open channels dialogue with the PLO in Tunisia through their ambassador Palestine. You know, in 1973, there was the doctrine, the Kissinger doctrine, where Kissinger, then Secretary of State, issued a memorandum throughout the executive branch of the government saying that no American, no U.S. Official can meet, negotiate, talk with a member of the PLO until the PLO fulfills the following 3 conditions. One is accept the right of Israel to live within security and defined boundaries, or the right of Israel to exist. Second, accept Security Council Resolution 242 and 338. And third, that the PLO renounce all acts of terrorism. And this doctrine held for until 1988. Nobody could ever challenge it. There was a document. And that's why the United States did not open dialogue or negotiate with the PLO from 1973 to 88. When in 88, Arafat, in the Algiers conference, succeeded in getting the implicit agreement of all factions. Mind you, there are 8 factions in the PLO. Some of them are radicals, don't accept Arafat, and some of them do. So he got the consensus of the whole Palestine National Council to meet the American demands, the three demands. Once he met the demands, the administration said, good boy, you got 100, so we'll talk to you. We'll have a dialogue with you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have had contact with Palestinians and Jordanian officials. There is a mistrust between the two. You say that they are basically Jordanian citizens. If they are, how come the Palestinians do not pay taxes and have separate rules and regulations with them as considered part of another territory? You also have Palestinians, a place where you have one of the generals. You also have some in which you would call your parliament. They have a certain group or certain percentage are Palestinians elected with it. How can you really reassure that King Hussein will not be overturned? I am for the protection of Jordan.
I think there are at least two questions. One, is there a peculiar state occupied by Palestinians who are Jordanian citizens? And secondly, is there a threat of some kind to the king and his regime posed by the Palestinians within the country?
Well, thank you for your sentiment to Jordan. On the question of whether there is a discrimination or two-tier system for treating citizens in Jordan, the answer is no, if you are talking about Jordan. Why? Because Palestinians pay taxes in Jordan. I do pay taxes. My boss, who is a Palestinian, pay taxes. A month ago, my foreign minister, my ultra boss, was a Palestinian, and he paid taxes. So there is no differentiation, no treatment. As for the certain blocks, as you said, in the parliament, our parliament, which the last elections we had was in 1966, was composed of 60 members. 30 to be elected, 60. 30 will be elected from the East Bank and 30 from the West Bank. And they kept on forever. When somebody dies, the parliament will get together and elect somebody from his district. If somebody dies from Bethlehem, then a guy is elected from there. As for the whole story of Palestinians being persecuted, Palestinians being punished in Jordan,
I didn't say that.
no, I'm saying that I'm adding. It's not.
They don't have to pay taxes. That might not be a person.
No, they pay taxes because my boss, the ambassador, is Palestinian. He pays taxes. If he doesn't, then I'll ask for it. Tax rebate. No, you know the cabinet is half West Bankers, half from the East Bank. And in support of my argument, everybody talks about Black September, 1970. There was this really serious, awful thing happened in Jordan between Jordanians and Palestinians. It was not between Jordanians and Palestinians. It was between the government, the Jordanian army, and the militia of the PLO. We opened our borders after the '67 war for the PLO to come and have bases and training and all this infrastructure. Then the PLO started raiding Israel, and then Israel raids back to Jordan. And we ended with something like 25,000 militia in Amman, a small town. They were not educated, they were not trained, they were not taught that you are in a host country. So things went out of hand, and then there was a clash between the army and the PLO militia. The prime minister at that time, in that war, was a Palestinian, was a West Banker, Mohammed Dawood. The half of the cabinet was a Palestinian. My ex-foreign minister was a Palestinian. Ambassador in Washington, in New York, they are all. So this whole story of that they are discriminated or don't pay taxes or they are treated different from others.
I think I'm the, yes, sir. The next event.
Your Excellency, who was the last speaker of your parliament?
What's his name?
I think there's a point behind that question, but the question is the name of your last speaker of your party.
Oh, he must remember. No, but well, it's, you know, the last speaker is his name is Hikmet al-Masri. Hikmet al-Masri is the deputy of the Speaker of the House. Hikmet actually is in the Senate, but he was the speaker there. And Hikmet al-Masri is from Nablus, from the West Bank, and a member of the some PLO committee.
Yes.
Dr. Lufti, now if I understand the sense of the UN resolution,
A very short question, please, sir.
already with the demilitarization of a prospective Palestinian state, the self-determination and impossible sovereignty of the Palestinians starts to evaporate before it exists. Now, as an economist, is it possible to have a sovereign and self-determined Palestinian state in the territory of the West Bank and Gaza? Is it possible that the Palestinian state, as we're talking about it now, is a pipe dream and always will be?
The question is, would a Palestinian state within the boundaries of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank be economically could it be economically self-sufficient, or alternatively, is it merely a pipe dream?
First, one clarification of the UN resolution. It doesn't say about demilitarizing the future plan. No, it doesn't. This is in the process of 15 years of negotiations with the United States. Passing message to Israel is that when the state comes up, there must be a period where we have to regain confidence in both. That the Israelis will coexist with the Palestinians, and the Palestinians will coexist. There's no more threat of war. So the new state should not have Phantoms and F-16 and Air Force and these things. It cannot sustain this. Economically speaking, whether the West Bank and Gaza Strip will be economically viable, it will be economically viable in Middle Eastern terminology. Every country in the Middle East is, when you say economically viable, means it has balanced budget or whatever. Not all of them have balanced budget. Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Egypt, everywhere, except oil producing countries. So the territories will be, hopefully, conduits for technical, financial, commercial cooperation or interaction between Israel and its hopefully future markets in the Middle East.
Yes, sir, in the rear. I believe there are two questions. One is, how can you expect a group of people like the PLO, who have practiced terrorism for a period of time, to make a transition to be the advocates of a peaceful solution and the peaceful operation of a particular state, A? And B, would not more moderate residents of the West Bank be better representatives?
First of all, we have to differentiate between our support for the PLO and our position on terrorism. We support the PLO as a political institution, and they have the right, and we support the Palestinians on the West Bank. They have the right to resist the Israeli forces. We suffered a lot. We are victims of terrorism, of PLO terrorism. So our support to the PLO does not mean that we support their terrorist acts against us. In Jordan, the Jordan Foreign Service suffered more casualties from PLO terrorist acts more than any other Arab country. We lost our guys in Rome, was our ambassador. We lost a guy in another attack in New Delhi. A guy was killed in Turkey. two guys were killed in Spain, one in Athens. So we had our record with the factions or the terrorist acts. We do not support them. We do not allow them to use our territories. We try to convince other Arab countries not to support them. But our support is low because they are the only legitimate representative of the Palestinians. They have to be responsible. They have to sit. When Israel sits and negotiates with the Arabs, they can't sit and negotiate with Arabs, a concept. They have to sit with somebody and sign it. In any peace settlement, there will be give and take. You give me something, I give you something. So the Palestinians have to, they are gaining rights and new things, but they are giving up something. There must be somebody who sits there and signs these concessions and signs these gains. It is not us, it is the PLO. And the West Bankers, the Palestinians of the West Bank Delta, have declared in many occasions that the PLO is their representative. That's why we support it. We don't support the terrorist acts.
Yes, sir.
As I understand it, one of the demands of the Palestinians is that those Palestinians who lived in Israel prior to 1948 and who were dispossessed are to be allowed to return not only to the Gaza and West Bank territories, but to all of Israel, wherever they lived prior to 1947-48. What would be the impact of that kind of thing? How realistic is that point of view?
How realistic would it be for Palestinians who left the present territory of Israel and apparently left behind property and possessions to return, and presumably to the land that they left behind? Is that a practical demand?
It is not for me to judge whether it's practical or impractical. There are Palestinians living in Israel and they are Israeli citizens, 600,000 more. There are Palestinians on the West Bank and Gaza. There are Palestinians in the diaspora. The future of the going home or being compensated will be settled in the talks, the international conference. The Palestinians will sit with the Israelis and they will sign, they will accept A, reject B, and they will sign for it. No, what we are saying is that nobody is entitled to negotiate on behalf of the Palestinians except the Palestinians themselves and their representatives. So when they sit with the Israelis, they will agree. Whatever formula they reach, we will bless.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
As I understand your position, in return for an unconditional withdrawal of Israeli forces to borders which are militarily untenable, in return for that, Israel gets a promise that the Arabs will not take advantage of this fact and wipe them out. Now, the last time we had an international conference which sponsored such an idea, we called it Munich. That resulted in a country called Czechoslovakia lost its sovereignty. Now, isn't your prescription for a final settlement really a prescription for a final solution?
How would you deal with the problem of Israel's forces returning to a vulnerable military position if they simply left the West Bank? What kind of larger solution would be necessary in order to not leave Israel militarily vulnerable within her own borders?
One thing that came clear during the last 5 years is that territories are not a basic necessity for security arrangements. If you look at our region, as King Hussein in one of his speeches said, that if you fly a commercial aeroplane from Beirut, from the cockpit you can see Haifa, Jerusalem, Amman, Damascus, and Beirut. They are within range from every capital. As for the Israelis withdrawing to 1967 borders and becoming so fragile, I don't think they are now secured on the river, on the borders, especially with the introduction of the missile missile factor in the Middle East. You know, a missile can cross borders without visas. So the only security for Israel is to sit and have peace. That's it. Have peace and let the Palestinians live and forget their pain and trouble. But the concept of territories is no factor in security.
I think you were next, sir.
You have mentioned in the international conference several times, but you haven't mentioned specifically who the participants would be. However, you implied that by all interested parties, which would mean about 7 Arab countries and 2 countries on the side, 1 country on the side of Israel, namely Israel, and maybe the United States. So any outcome from such an international conference would be predetermined. What is your reaction?
Would the representation at any international conference be such that Israel would be simply outnumbered, and hence the outcome prejudiced?
If I may correct, I didn't say interested parties, I said involved parties. So what we mean by when the UN Secretary General invites the parties concerned to the conference, it will be the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, United States, Soviet Union, China, Britain, and France. Second, the involved parties, which are Israel, the Lebanese, Syria, Jordan, and the Palestinians. Those are the parties.
Yes, Mr. Barker.
If you just mentioned Lebanon would be one of the involved parties. Lebanon has not even been able to elect a new president. How do you expect them to attend an international conference?
The question of how do you expect Lebanon to be able to have effective representation at the conference, given its internal conditions?
Well, the problem with Lebanon is that there are too many parties involved in Lebanon, more than the Middle East region. If we have the courage and the guts to go to the conference, and we need Lebanon, then logically the Syrian forces and the Israeli forces will withdraw, and the Lebanese will be left to decide on their representative to the. And it's no problem. Once the 2 guys leave, Lebanon can find a way.
Yes, sir.
In your last response, you mentioned the word guts, and that's relative to the question I'm about to ask you. Why is it that over all these years that these Arab countries didn't do anything about building up an infrastructure of other leadership, in view of the fact that it's well known there wasn't much love between your king, Hussein, and the PLO leader? With all the wealth that Saudi Arabia has and all these other countries, wasn't it very unrealistic for them not to try to build up a leadership of that nature, especially knowing that Israel had become a country which could defend itself?
I don't see the connection between the wealth of Saudi Arabia and building a leadership. I have no idea what's the correlation.
Did you get it?
Well, until your last sentence, I thought I had it. I thought the question was going to be, why did not Arab leadership build up Palestinian leadership as an alternative to PLO leadership?
So this has nothing to do with mine. Japanese technology. Why Arab leaders didn't promote Palestinian leadership? First of all, we in Jordan, we were the only country that gave the Palestinians passports. The rest of the Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, they gave them identity cards, which means they are not nationals, they cannot work in the governments, and they maintain their living there. I would assume that the only leadership that came from the Palestinian ranks was the PLO, which emerged in 1964, which is 3 years before the war, in Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was part of Jordan. When we talk Jerusalem, we talk about the eastern part of Jerusalem. The PLO. Then things went on. Now, in 1977, I think, there was the only serious effort to promote a local Palestinian leadership when there was elections on the West Bank under Israeli auspices, and there were 23 mayors elected democratically who represented everybody on the West Bank. This was really a good source for the Israelis to negotiate with the representatives of the West Bank. What happened is that they fired them all, and 2 were bombed, lost their legs. So there's no Palestinian leadership on the West Bank. Now the new generation of rebellious young Palestinians, there is no leadership on the West Bank because it's mostly either in jail or deported to southern Lebanon or Jordan.
Well, because the PLO kill them off.
No. PLO didn't kill 18,000 in Lebanon. Yes, ma'am.
It's been more than 40 years since Israel's establishment, with the multiple problems that you've mentioned tonight, with obvious reasons that Israel doesn't want an international conflict. What do you think the chances are of a peace within the next half dozen years?
Can Israel be encouraged to participate in the kind of
Trying to make my job easier to get his question.
There has to be a transition from the circumstance today, which is uncomfortable for Israel, to the conference that you suggest. And another way of phrasing the question would be, what kind of transition do you imagine from the no saying of Israel, which you described, to some kind of a resolution?
Well, from the last hour, you see that hopeless case talking about the Middle East. I define the Middle East for my friends as a source of permanent employment. Sorry to say this, but this is. We stated our position. The only chances for peace in the Middle East is that the Palestinians accept the Israelis' right to exist and they will stay there for the rest of their lives. On the same basis, the Israelis have to accept that there are Palestinians next to them, they're going to stay there and they're going to live forever. So between the both two of them, they have to negotiate their future. A way out of this mess in the Middle East, and we see an Israeli, not total acceptance, but limited acceptance. We ask if the Israelis don't accept, they will never negotiate with the PLO, then let them negotiate with the elected leadership on the West Bank. This could be done through elections on the West Bank. We do not believe in elections under Israeli rule. Israel should say, okay, I'm pulling out, bring some heavenly body to overlook the elections, and whoever makes it will negotiate for the West Bank and Israel. Today we heard, before a couple of days ago, because the Israelis are having some problems with the West Bank, it's becoming a financial problem, military problem, demoralizing factor among armed forces. We saw Rabin saying, I'm ready to talk to the Palestinians if they stop the uprising, the intifada. Today we heard Prime Minister Shamir say that we will, if I can remember the words, we are ready, the Israelis are ready to withdraw from the cities if the Palestinians accept an autonomy, limited autonomy for themselves. Which is a change for the first time from Shamir. Naturally, this proposal was rejected by the West Bankers and rejected by the Arabs. Because had we accepted autonomy, we would have accepted Camp David a long time ago, 11 years ago. There must be an Israeli withdrawal, there must be a Palestinian exercise of self-determination, and Israel cannot assign representatives to the Palestinians. The Palestinians should choose for themselves. So, and let them wait. Maybe the Palestinians, when they exercise the right of self-determination, they might not confederate with Jordan. They might find it economically or nationally good to stay as a state. They might think in the long run it's better to confederate with Israel. But it's their right. Don't prejudge their right. That's it.
We're not going to be able to recognize everyone. We're going to have to end in just a minute. But I know, sir, you've been waiting a long time.
The chances of solving a problem are diminished greatly by having too many people at the table. The theory that it can be solved by the United Nations calling a meeting of all the involved parties seems to be a very opportunity. What are the chances of Jordan acting as a leader and negotiating with Israel, somewhat like Sadat did some years ago, with great success?
Would you evaluate what might come from King Hussein doing something similar to what Anwar Sadat did a number of years ago?
Well, the state of fact is Anwar Sadat succeeded in one part, failed in the other part. Anwar Sadat succeeded